But it's interesting, you kind of talk about cloud and, the ability to take those kind of consistent capabilities and take them from on-prem into cloud. I suppose maybe just less about the data for the moment, but maybe that's an interesting conversation to have. For people who are thinking about moving to cloud storage, it's actually, while we say lots of these table stake things are a given on-prem, that's not necessarily true of moving to cloud, is it? So are there some different considerations people should have as they consider cloud storage versus what they've traditionally thought of on-prem?
Yeah, it's interesting. If you look across the clouds, there are over 30 storage services you can choose from. And they all try and target a different kind of use case as such. But what most of them still lack is the kind of enterprise capabilities around about, you need zero data loss, you need high performance, you need backup and recovery of data, you need encryption of data, you need storage efficiencies of data, reducing the cost of actually storing that data. And we take those as givens on premise, but actually being able to do those, which you can't do natively really in the public clouds. And that's where NetApp's offering in those clouds really offers value, because we bring that same platform into those clouds. And then customers don't have to pick and choose. They can actually standardize how they manage data and gain all the advantages that I've just talked about in that respect. So it's really important because, the storage environments in the cloud are, I wouldn't say they're very basic, but they're not as advanced as you'd expect from your data center footprints. So being able to do that in the clouds as well is a real value proposition that NetApp bring.
Yeah, and I think that's a kind of an interesting point, isn't it? Again, about that idea of the things you take for granted, no pun on your name intended, but the things you take for granted on-prem in terms of optimization, and even at that basic level, that idea, and I think we were talking before we recorded about actually something I've worked on recently with somebody where they were considering, well, we want to take this stuff off-prem and put it in a public cloud. And what they hadn't thought about was, all of the capabilities they were getting on-prem in their data center around compression, deduplication, shrinking a data set down by 30, 40, 50%. They weren't thinking about the impacts of moving that to the public cloud and kind of that explosion the other way. And I mean, is that something you're seeing people not necessarily getting caught out by, but it's maybe a bit of a surprise when you take it to them?
Yeah, because when you buy storage on premise, you're buying it for 3 to 5 years. It's an upfront payment for that data, effectively, for that capacity. But you're right, if you have to rehydrate, let's say you gain 50% efficiencies through the hardware technologies in your data center. If you have to move that workload to the cloud, you have to pay twice as much for that data. And you pay it on an OpEx, a monthly basis. So it becomes really apparent very quickly, the differences between storing that data in the data center and storing it in the public clouds. So it's really important to take the same technology from on-prem to the cloud, which is what we do, but actually even retain that dehydrated data as you move from on-prem to cloud, because even if you have to rehydrate just to get to the cloud, there's time and effort and cost of bandwidth and replication times to do that. So being able to maintain those efficiencies across on-prem and multiple clouds really makes it much more, cost effective, but also, better for the customer at the end of the day.
And I suppose that idea of, because there's cost in rehydrating it before you move it. But actually, if you've got that capability in the cloud and on-prem, one of the things that I see people get caught out a lot by is as you pull data out of the cloud, there's the charges that come with that. So I suppose we're saying that actually, if you can make that data that you need to pull out be smaller and more efficient in the way you pull out, you can save costs there as well. Yeah,
I mean, IDC did a survey where they looked at, of the workloads customers push to the cloud, how many end up coming back out of the cloud. And it's a really high figure. It's somewhere in the region of about 50% or higher of workloads get put into the cloud. They become too expensive. They get pulled back on premise. And just that movement of data costs you money. So egress, you don't usually pay for pushing data into the cloud, but you definitely pay for pulling it out of the cloud. So that egress cost. And if you could put a data set in that's optimized in the cloud, but pull it out optimized, then you don't have that rehydration. And actually, hydration itself is a problem on premise, because have you got capacity to hydrate before you go to the cloud? Have you got capacity in the cloud to hydrate if you want to bring it back? It's a real challenge for customers to try and get around, and can be expensive at the same time.
So let's take because we started out talking about kind of the idea of storage at an infrastructure layer. There's lots of table stake type stuff that people should expect, and rightly so. And actually, most leading enterprise storage vendors are doing all the things that we talked about. But the value in the conversations you're having, it seems like, is much more around how do I get the best out of data. So in terms of doing that, what's kind of the starting point? So if somebody's listening to us chatting here and saying, well, okay, I want to know more about my data so I can use it more effectively. I suppose maybe actually two questions. Why should they bother? and then where do they start?
Yeah, there's actually a couple of kind of conversations there, because why bother? Cost, time to markets, all of these things are important, and that's why the technologies could really help you. But there's actually two sides to that. One is actually looking at the data that they're storing in the first place. Have they looked at how much they've got, whether it's optimized, whether they've got the right securities, governance, compliance over data? That's a conversation before you even think about moving into the cloud or not. And then once you decide that you do want to put into the cloud, whether it's from NetApp or not from NetApp, you really need to think about what landing zone am I going to build this on? What features do I need to build into that? Because if you don't build them into the kind of storage landing zone in the cloud, you'll have to build them into the application. And the old days of doing applications and data was the shared storage platform did your business continuity, your HA, and if it was a good platform, it integrated into the application as well, so that all the kind of log management was taken care of. You still need to do that in the cloud somewhere. And that's one of the benefits of having the technologies we've got anyways. You can think, well, we need to do X, Y, and Z. We can already do that for you and give you that landing zone, storage landing zone in the cloud that you can then subsequently build on top of. So there's a lot of factors there that people need to think about, not just what data they've got, what they want to move to the cloud, but then how they treat that data, how they store that data, and bring a lot of the features that we've talked about into that environment.